Perfect.
All
Awesome.
right. Back on. I will share my screen. Okay. Can you see this again? Cool. All right.
Oh, Sheila said.
I don't recall where I was, but again, our goal, I don't recall mentioning this, but the goal for today or week 1 would be to continue into involving more identification in, and that's basically the goal of most of what we're going to go through in the entire course. I haven't even gone through a lot today. That's okay because I want to start slow. But basically, our entire goal is to work our way up to here, starting from the staff. We already went through this, and notation and rhythm, or I'm sorry, I keep saying it differently, pitch and rhythm in order to create standard notation here. So, completely off that subject, we were talking about clefs. And I don't recall, yeah, I mentioned this about the grand staff. So that was the extra note here. We talked about our string orchestra instruments, violin, viola, cello, bass, and then one extra thing, just if you happen to get a gig being a music librarian and you need to abbreviate, I don't know, your abbreviations will be VN, VA, VC, and DB. This is because, again, violin and viola, using the first and last letter. And then for VC, this is violoncello, and that's the old abbreviation or the older name that they used for cello, shortened down to cello instead of a violoncello, because everything is a version of each other. It's just like a baby cello being a violin or an adult violin being a cello, something like that. And then you have DB for double bass. So we talked about using these 3 clefs, and one extra thing to notice is that all of these sit just inside the staff. I understand that treble exceeds the staff by using like this little umbrella hook at the bottom and then using this loop at the top. Alto stays fully inside the staff, and so does bass. All the other clefs between or besides alto and bass exceed the staff. So we're kind of special in this sense that we stay inside. I don't know if you want to see it as that. Okay, so one thing to understand is that all you need is patterns in order to memorize things. You don't have to memorize every single thing unless, or if you have the pattern with you, whenever talking about your lines and spaces, you have all these different acronyms. So if you check it out, there's basically a pattern of A through G and then using thirds. Here's a third, 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 because again, we're skipping. So we're skipping a line to go to a space. We're skipping a space to go to a line up here. And when on a different clef, it's a little bit different. Again, like how you have your spaces in treble, spelling face, you'll have that at the beginning for the lines in alto clef, and then you add a G at the end. For bass clef, again, it's very similar. You have the FA and then ACE down here, so many different variations of face. And what I used last year was this to show the thirds. Here are your violin spaces, and then here are your viola lines. Yeah, and it's all tied together. So from here, notice whenever you need to identify, always refer to the middle line of the staff. In treble clef, our middle line is B. In alto, our middle line is C. So we already talked about earlier that alto's clef always, or a clef similar to alto clef, like another one we like to use or talk about is tenor, just because it's close by. Whenever having one that looks like a 1, 1, 3, or 1, 1 fancy 3, this arrow in the middle always points to a C. So looking at tenor clef, can you tell me what is the middle line in tenor clef? the middle line on the staff, I mean.
Is it A? No, wrong way.
Yeah, you're
Oh,
correct.
is it A?
Because again,
Okay.
down. So if you move down, you're moving backwards right through your alphabet.
You're so awesome.
I had to think. I'm not used to that.
You're thinking great.
Yeah, just because this is pointing to a C, so that would be A. And then if we look down here at Mezzo Soprano, which is not too common to see, what would this middle line be? You have to think about it. If this is C.
The C middle line would be F?
You're so close.
G.
Because again, if you're thinking in thirds here, you have
Thirds. Forgot about that. Is it E?
it's E.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah. So that's one way to think about it. Now, throughout all of that, you'll find many different clefs in your lifetime, but really the ones that matter are the ones that you're using. Especially on these theory exams, they're probably not going to introduce you to anything besides treble and bass for a while, unless you happen to have alto, like if you're a viola student. But for piano, I'll let you know in the levels up above like 8 or 9-ish, you shouldn't have any more that, correspond with cello or violin or something like that. And it will just be piano levels 9 through 12. And then they've added a 13 as well. So generally, in whatever instrument you play, you'll still need to understand the piano side of things. Yeah. So all of this is referring to pitch, here to here to here. And whenever you memorize the middle line, here the middle line is B, then you have C and D. And so that's exactly why I tried to line it up like that. If you recall, tenor clef's middle line is A, and then mezzo soprano's is E, which you just determined. So that's one nice way of just going through and memorizing. Here, while memorizing rhythm, this example is going to give you exactly what you need to follow through. You have your whole note, half note, quarters, eighths, and sixteenths. So every single thing is chopped down just a little bit. Here you're beginning with 4, divide it by 2, so you're going to chop it in half. It'll be 2 beats, chop it in half, 1 beat, and then way further, it's half of a beat, an eighth note being half, and then a 16th note is one of our tiniest notes here. And beyond would be a 32nd note, which they probably will not have on the test in any level. Maybe in like the highest, but I'm not sure. So whenever you understand your rhythm, what you can find is a rhythm tree. So this tree chops it down, it goes a little bit further, so you have your halves, and then you chop these down further, and what you can see is everything, all of these together, they equal a whole note. So 4 quarters equals a whole note, 2 halves equals a whole note, and then 8 eighth notes equals a whole note. And one amazing thing about that is if you have eighth in the name of eighth note and you have 8 of these, that's one way to tell. If you have many eighth notes that you need to follow the same amount of beats as a whole note, eighth meaning you need 8. A quarter means 4 or a fourth, so you need 4 quarters here. And then getting into fractions and all that, a half would be over 2, so half meaning 2. You only need 2 half notes, and it's going to equal your whole note. And a whole note meaning it's at the top of the tree, so that's exactly our goal here. So I have highlighted what we just went through here. And then one extra thing to add, even if it's all that we need to understand for today, we will add the dotted half note. So understand whenever adding a dot to this, you're adding half of what is already given. And that's my main way of wording it. Whenever I have a half note, I have 2 beats. So whenever I add a dot, it's going to be half of 2 beats, because 2 beats is what? 2 beats is already given. Sorry. The wording gets a little lost. So my dot is going to represent 1/4 if you chop down a half note into a quarter, which is why a dotted half note equals 3 beats. 2 plus 1 equaling 3. So a dotted quarter note would be similar in the sense that you're taking it down. A dotted quarter note would be 3/8 notes tied together. So 1 whole and a half. 1.5 beats. So if anybody watching this needs to pause the recording and just check this out, definitely do. I'm moving a little bit fast here because I know, Colin, you understand very much going on, a nice majority. This is almost the last thing we'll go over for today, and this is just identifying a couple of things. Right here, this is what we went over last year, because again, these are all green slides like I talked about earlier. But what is something that you are able to identify from this piece? Think about it, whether it's the number of measures, dynamics, dynamic changes, anything involving the instrument specifically. Like I notice you have pedal here. Oh yeah, and I need to blow this up a little bit. You have the title, the composer, the tempo marking. So identifying would just be saying one simple thing like, oh, I understand that there are 2 endings to this because of this repeat sign. Something like that. So I know we didn't talk about key signatures and time signatures, but if you do understand, you could also identify what time signature we're in. Something like that.
Oh, wow, 3/8, sorry, I'm blinking.
Oh, you're good. Oh, I'm clearly not doing this right. There we go. Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Okay, but can you see it all right?
Yeah, I can.
So, would you like to identify anything?
It's using a grand staff.
Nice.
It has a clef change, I see. And what measure is that? In measure 12, there's a clef change.
Mm-hmm.
There's first and second endings. And it has a lot of 16th notes.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah, I always thought it was 8th notes and just quick 8th notes. Didn't know it was 16th notes. Flurries.
there you go. Yeah. I mean, he could have, chopped down the BPM a little bit, and he could have he could have heightened the BPM to have it, as fast as he needed, to where you could just still write eighths. That would be just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. From last year, I'll just say we identified the 3/8 time signature. So that's just for anybody kind of, on the edge of understanding time signatures or how to identify them. You would say the top number first and then the bottom number just as that. You wouldn't say 3/8, even though that's exactly how it's written. But 3/8 time signature, you identified the same thing. We have the grand staff, and then you have treble and bass clefs included, and you noticed the clef change. So measure 12 being the clef change in the left hand, the pianist performing, and then measure 15 moving back And first and second endings, we have 2 different repeats right here, first ending, second ending, and then continual pedal points. This is just referring to, again, you have so many different points of pedal right in here. It's Beethoven, it's what he does. And clef changes, like how you said. Nice. So, yeah, from week 1, what we've already gone over today was pretty much a nice majority of this. Do you have any questions though?
No?
All right, excellent. Yeah, and I didn't go over this, but I'm not trying to like lecture as much anymore from last year, but our lecture 1 would be, oh, I understand what I'm saying here. Yeah, I didn't even read this yet. This is exactly where music theory begins, starting from the staff, and it's the basic study using, or used through, I mean, it is the language of music, so we're communicating through this, even if it's just saying, oh, that piece has 5 measures. I mean, that's incredible. And becoming aware of how to identify many of these different components, especially in musical notation. That's what we did today. And we're using a little bit of info going further. So I want you to understand all the other instruments besides your own. That's why we went through all these neighboring clefs. One thing looking into week 2, hopefully we won't have any like internet issues. I will try to set up a hotspot as well, just so we don't, have any jumping off and jumping on again.
That was your mom's fault.
Oh no, it's all good.
Nice to see you, Colin.
Yeah. Yeah. So next week we will go through the circle of fifths, jumping deeper into the first beginning of line 1 of any piece. You'll always see your clef, then your key signature, and then your time signature. And we'll talk about that more. So I know this says a group quiz, which is why next week I'm gonna have something, like I knew we didn't want to do anything today if it's the first week. But something like a Google spreadsheet or slide or something where we'll talk about one of these musical examples. Yeah. Piano references. One extra thing just to keep under your belt is that music theory always begins from piano, and most of the piano concepts happen to be transferred to instrumentalist concepts, and it's also very different. I mean, they don't have bowing and everything, but that's where the music theory begins. So if you start becoming, or if you are a musician started as a pianist, it's very helpful.
Yeah, I don't actually know how to play the piano.
That's okay, and that's also what we might begin doing just a little bit. If I have, yeah, if I were to take my computer down to my studio, I guess I could try to figure out how to play and show you fingering and all that. So,
Okay.
yeah. I will stop sharing for just a sec. So I'm gonna go ahead and end our recording, but hopefully all this gets together, and I think I have multiple recordings on here. So pause this.